I would now like to ask Rahul to introduce Dr. Pramod Varma, Chief Architect of Aadhaar, who will be delivering the keynote address on Building for a Billion. Rahul, over to you.
Thanks again, Gayatri. It gives me immense pleasure to introduce you to my close friend, mentor, technology guru, and inspiration to all of us, Dr. Pramod Varma. Pramod is one of the world's best technology architects. No one understands how to build population scale systems better than he does. Starting with Aadhaar in 2009, where he continues to be chief architect, Pramod also architected eSign, Digital Locker, UPI, and most recently Beacon that powers several open standards such as Unified Health Interface, Open Network for Digital Commerce, IDEA for Agriculture, amongst others. Pramod is also the CTO at EkStep, a non-profit that has helped build several digital building blocks under the Sunbird umbrella, bringing together several organizations. He has been an amazing mentor, having inspired several organizations and individuals to start contributing to open source GovTech. It is indeed an honor to welcome you, Pramod. Over to you for your keynote address.
Thanks, Rahul. You're very kind to introduce me like this. But by the way, for some reason, I'm not white. I have a black hair, in case you're seeing my white hair. Okay, there's something going on with the Zoom video. You are not seeing my video correctly, right? You are not seeing, right?
Yeah, we can see the old version of Pramod, although you've got
a I know, yeah. But yeah, so I'm going to switch it up. Something has gone bonkers with Zoom. I just got off Zoom and it was working well. I don't know.
No, please don't worry.
But I'm going to share a deck. By the way, just pleasure to see all of you. Wonderful to see all of you stepping up to contribute towards open source and GovTech. Nothing like having young people like you guys. So I'm going to share my deck, okay? And actually switch back to a question answer subsequently. Okay. Are you able to see it? You can confirm by, yeah. If someone can confirm by audio, if you can see that?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to rush through very quickly, okay? And some of you may have heard me speaking before, but you need to take a step back. And I think you need to understand why open source in Gov and building national digital infrastructure, public infrastructure is such a critical thing. And, India has been blessed with lots of IT talent and including all of you. And so we have the capability and we have the intent to use open source everywhere. And I can tell you, I can talk through some of this. But understand something really big is happening in India. And it's very different from much part of the world. And they're all learning from India aggressively. And now you saw the news about UPI going to France. UPI is already in Singapore and Dubai. And because I think while some of the people here tend to not believe that we can actually do it, when we pull it off, I think everybody seems to be mesmerized by the beauty of such a system. So anyway, we have been lucky enough to get some things right. So we'll talk about that today. But you need to understand a larger purpose of why GovTech and why digital public infrastructure. And I'll give you a sneak preview, and these are only part of it, okay, for the young people who may not have seen. Back in 2008, by the way, India had 17% people with bank accounts. 17. And probably none of you, I don't know whether you, maybe unless some of you come from really underprivileged family, most of you, probably your parents as well, had bank accounts. That means all of you are the part of the 17 or 20% who had bank accounts. 2009 is when Aadhaar identity program was launched. And 2011 is even then we were under 20%. That is only 20% of the people had access to bank account. Think about it. That's a terrible state to be in. When was smartphone launched? 2007, right? And iPhone, and then 2008, Android. Even when the world was getting connected and everybody starting to have smartphone launched, we were so behind in bank accounts. The same thing, by the way, India is also a very high subsidy giving country, because much of Indians, out of 900 odd million adults, and nearly 4 billion people. Much of the people actually depend on government subsidies. But what is the problem again? Huge leakage. And why did I put gas cylinder? Because no common man has gone through not seeing cooking gas subsidy, right? Almost, if anybody know, if you come from middle class, you know your parents would have availed cooking gas subsidy because everybody had, and this was a big deal. And this was not the only one. Fertilizer subsidy, pensions and scholarships, and so much of money used to go down the pipe, and with lots of corruption. And it's not a good place to be in because eventually it's taxpayers' money. But in general, if you abstract it, it was not only restricted to bank account and everything, even lending. Do you know how many our GDP to lending ratio is so pathetic that, you know, sort of Vijay Mallya's of the world can easily get 10,000 crores because of the, you know, the systems prefer to lend to few large institutional borrowers. So there was a study conducted by Institute of Management Bangalore, one of the professor. I'm very sure all of you are trying, or much of you, many of you are trying CAT and all. It's one of those Indian religion, right? Everybody has to write a CAT exam. So as you're trying, and when they joined the campus, the first day of their campus recruitment, there was many banks who set it up in the campus, offering loans. Obviously, because they're all coming, they're going to come out with massive salary, 1 crore salary, half crore salary, and all the ridiculously shameful salaries, right? So it's pretty straightforward these days. So IIM guys know it, so the banks know it, so they were all camping outside to lure students into taking some big loans, and it's not a bad deal. Go get it. But instead, the professor challenged students to go out directly to the market and try to get a 10,000 rupee loan, not a 10 lakh loan, 10,000 rupees. Zero people managed to get it. Zero people managed to get it. That's because our systems today does not have the ability to deliver high volume, low tenure, low sachet size. So what do you think people are doing? The people who driver who work at your place, or a maid who work at your place, if they want a 5,000, 10,000 rupee loan for a small surgery in the hospital, where do you think they are going? They go to money lender, roadside money lenders. Institutions have failed them. It's not because we wanted to fail them. It's because of the compliance costs. So look at the 3 costs. Understand these 3 costs. These are the fundamentals of delivery of anything in the country. Cost of acquisition of a customer, cost of continuous engagement with that customer. Even if you're an entrepreneur, when you start a company, you will have these costs to deal with, okay? And cost of engagement and cost of trust. A lot of banks, when you walk in and say, oh, by the way, I'm an IIM student, or I'm from this, or I'm an SME, the roadside kirana shop guy, there's no way to prove any of this. And there is the cost of trust is very high. So low tenure, low volume, what a high volume lending offers are impossible. So this is, again, as an example, same thing goes for tech everywhere, okay? So you'll see the same thing happening. But if you fast forward, I'm fast forwarding, it's no more 2009, it's 2020 or 2021. This is 2021 data, by the way. $70 billion US dollars went directly to people's bank account in India. No middleman. In the last 10 years, Indian government delivered benefits directly to bank account. 310 schemes, state and center government. Roughly 6 billion transactions. India is the only country in the world that has the infrastructure, digital infrastructure, to deliver money at negligible cost directly to bank accounts of people. This is why when COVID hit, 450 million people received COVID benefits in the first lockdown, by the way. You know what US did? Did you any of you study what US did? US were writing check. US government was writing check and posting it to people's houses to give $50, $100, and $200, $300. I mean, the cost of the posting and cost of writing that check and cost of depositing check is probably more than that what you are sending. So it doesn't even make any sense. And this is amazing what India has built, and we sort of underestimate the power of it. And this is a study from BIS. You know who BIS is? You know RBIS, of course, right? It is a Bank of India. It's a central bank in India, and all the central bank of central bank goes to BIS, Bureau of International Settlements in Basel. Okay, they came out with a report after studying India and said, India in 2011. We had just below around 20% bank account penetration. That was the flag. That's where the flag is. And if India did nothing unusual, nothing crazy like our India stack, if you did nothing crazy like India stack, we would have taken 46 years to get to 80% of the bank account. In a normal GDP plot, they plotted the GDP growth and they said, yeah, of course, we would have eventually given bank account to people, but it would have taken roughly about 46 years. You know how long India took to get to 80 plus, now plus 90 plus bank accounts? 6 years. So India compressed 4 decades of development cycle using digital technology, digital infrastructure, not some mobile app, underlying rails, digital rails for payments, digital rails for credentialing, which is DigiLocker, digital rail for identity, and digital rail for data now. That's what we are doing, right? That's the difference. India was systematically building digital infrastructure like countries build physical infrastructure, like shipyards and airports and railroads and highways. We build it, right? Of course, we build it for economic growth, but nobody thinks about digital infrastructure. We leave it to TikToks and Googles and Amazons of the world to hope that somehow one of them will solve it. They don't, because they have a different reason that they exist. They exist as a commercial venture. They are answerable to shareholders. They're not answerable to 900 million people who are in some country, right? If you're a customer, Amazon will pick up the call. If you're not a customer, why would you call? Right? So it's very important that countries cannot ignore the need for digital infrastructure, and India will. What are the layers? Very simple. Identity, just identity, a pure play identity. And all Aadhaar did was authentication and KYC, nothing more. And how many attributes Aadhaar had? 4 fields in the database. Name, date of birth, gender, address. That's it. Not even blood group, not even height, weight, not even caste, no religion, no BPL status, below poverty, above poverty, nothing. Just 4. It was just about identity. But the way it was built, that it was built with an open API on top of it, so that others can do single sign-on solutions and eKYC solutions and bank account opening and tax collection being better, benefits transfer getting better, PAHEL scheme, the cooking gas cylinder delivery scheme getting better, but they're done by different people. Today, Aadhaar does 1 billion digital authentications every month. 1.2 billion last month. You and I. 1.2 billion people, or out of that, maybe 300 million people, 2 or 3 times a month, are authenticating themselves to avail benefits for themselves, right? And this is an amazing story, right? 1.33 billion people have digital ID in India. No other country can actually claim this kind of penetration. It's just crazy. And on top of that, we built transaction systems, right? Core payment system, and electronic digital signature and payment system, both Aadhaar payment and UPI. And if you're not heard about UPI, not used UPI, I don't know where you have been in the last 4 years, but UPI is such a marvelous story from nothing in 2016 to 2022, where we just closing out 6 billion transactions a month. And last year alone, last year, India overtook real-time payments, overtook China plus US plus UK. So India is doing more real-time payment transactions than US, UK, and China put together, all in the last 4 years. This non-linear transformation comes from open digital infrastructure. And open digital infrastructure is built using open source, fundamental. Okay, and that's where you exist. That's why I'm speaking to you. why I even speaking to you is that, right? And of course, on top of that, we built DigiLocker for credentialing and Deeper, which is account aggregator. I don't know that you're starting to see where India as a country, unlike GDPR, US doesn't even have a privacy bill. Unlike Australia has done a good job there. India is setting up a digital infrastructure, not a central system, a digital infrastructure, protocol-driven digital infrastructure that allows you to own your data, and every driver of Uber to own their data, every plumber of urban company to own their data. You know what is it? Data becomes the asset for them. That means data reduces the cost of trust and cost of processing. Today, with account aggregator, a lending offer, there's pilots going on in this country, by the way, where real-time lending offers are made less than a minute with zero paperwork. I can authenticate using GSTN and Aadhaar, GSTN for the company, Aadhaar for myself, apply for a loan, get a loan offer, get the money, all by sharing my data and my bill payment data, tax payment data, directly, all digitally signed data with zero paperwork. And that is inclusive development. Not because you and I, the top 10% of the country, 80, 90 million people have access to everything, and the remaining 900 million people are left in the lurches. That's not what we are, because that great divide is not going to go anywhere, right? So it's very important that we actually create digital infrastructure that actually expands the market, expand access to products, access to services, access to healthcare, access to education, and so on. So this digital infrastructure was because India is crazy, and India is with all of us, tremendous IT skills in the country and good political will, good regulatory support. So we seem to be building much more than India's stack. We are building health stack, if you have not been tracking. We are building education stack with Rahul and Samagra as the integral part of that journey. Some of you will work on some of these as part of the GovTech. We have urban development infrastructure being developed, digital infrastructure, financial digital infrastructure like lending offers and so on. FASTag, all of you probably have experienced it. Everywhere now we are going, becoming that. And latest is, in case you have not heard, ONDC, which is taking on Amazon's and Uber's monopoly. India is taking on using a open electronic e-commerce marketplace, not even marketplace, open e-commerce network driven by protocol. And so what is the difference? Pre-90s, probably none of you have born, so I have to just tell you the story. Pre-90s, when we only had one telephone company called BSNL and one airline called Air India, and one everything, pretty much government run. So it's pretty bad, right? Obviously, nobody wants to go back to that time. If you have not lived there, don't live there, because you are very lucky. Consider yourself very lucky. Milk was rationed, food was rationed, and we all had to stand in line, including me, and including all of us, to get our milk and get our sugar. Okay, not the right time, because it becomes a single provider, and also slow innovation, and government being provider. The bargaining power is no more with you and I. It's always with the shopkeeper, and it's always with the government, Babu. So it's not never really did, in that sense, work out, right? But we moved on. But in the US, they went to the other extreme. If you analyze it, they just outsource everything to big tech. Then you have the same problem, winner take all behavior, walled garden behavior, and significant backlash from regulatory backlash in UK and EU and Australia against the big tech. And war, today's Ukraine war, demonstrated that outsourcing your payment infrastructure to a big tech is a disaster for a country. I'm not taking sides on who is the war, who is the right, wrong. War is never good for humanity and never should happen. But simply, two companies decided to switch off all digital payments to Russia. So imagine if India didn't build any of this infrastructure. Somebody could just flip a kill switch if some country doesn't like us, and we would have left with nothing. And today's maps and road and ATMs and payments, you depend on everything on digital. So we must have a balanced view, and that's what India is doing. India is saying we will create digital public infrastructure and digital public goods in the green, so that many of you who will turn into entrepreneurs will build phone pays of the world. and Paytms of the world, or GoFrugals of the world, or Mauglics of the world, and there are hundreds and hundreds of companies, entrepreneurs. Only some of them we hear of because they just raise a lot of funds. But there are lots of good, Zohos of the world, and Nitin Kama doing, Zerodha, and so on. I mean, name so many of them innovating, but they cannot innovate if you don't provide them a playing field, a playing ground for them to play, and actually access to 200, 300, 400 million who are aspirational Indian who wants all these products. They cannot be kept outside, right? But if you look behind each of them, there is open source product, and some of them are not directly, but there is an open source equivalent. And I've listed many of those open source. DeFi.world is the protocol. Backend protocol is behind ONDC and UHI. And Sunbird, much of you will start working on some of the building blocks, is what is powering Diksha around much of India. Digit.org and IUDX, which is IASC-driven project, is powering Urban Stack. And iSpirit's OCAM is powering the lending protocol, and many more. And the good thing is that, including, by the way, UPI, I don't know whether you know, but we have heard some of our talks, UPI and Aadhaar and every one of them doing massive amount of computing and massive amount of processing is completely built on this open source. So building GovTech, open source GovTech, is a serious investment, it's a serious ask, and our country, India, for sure, will depend on many of you and what you build and GovTech being built to run our digital infrastructure for 1 billion people. So it's important that you take this not as just another open source. Even one line of code going into Sunbird can change Diksha, and Diksha touches 200 million children today. So your code can impact, it is very, very large, and hence the responsibility. With great power comes to great responsibility, right? So, you are all, again, wonderful to see you all participating. Congratulations to every one of you. We need a lot more of you to put up your hand and join the effort of building open source digital infrastructure that powers our nation and ensure that we are resilient to our own, and we are in control of our own destiny for 1 billion people. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Pramod, for those amazing and really mind-blowing statistics. We don't pause to think that this is actually happening. In the last 10 years, India has changed. The world is asking India, hey, how did India do this and how did India do that? And it's truly transformational. You just made that so real for everyone. Thank you. So Pramod, moving to the Q&A, trying to understand a whole bunch of questions from a variety of sources that are coming in. So let's start with a question around standards and laws. So this question is around the future of DPGs in India. So we'll try to group these questions in different blocks. So you mentioned digital public goods are really the future backbone of building this kind of infrastructure. And one question around that is, how do laws and standards interoperate? Because what may be the perfect standard may not adhere to law, and cryptocurrency is kind of a great example where policy intersects standard. How do you, where does that come into the overall picture? How do you add that in?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, we are a democracy, and we have agreed as a society to adhere by our constitution, run some rules of the game for whether it's financial industry, health industry, and so on, keeping inclusion, definitely inclusion and societal development in mind, because we just cannot ignore millions and millions of families who need to be brought into the formal economy rather than leaving them to money lenders and on the roadside and so on, right? So keeping these principles and contours, our constitutional democratic contours, we must have definitely rules of the game that allows But there's a balance though, right? So laws are needed, but prescriptive laws are pretty bad, but because countries evolve very fast and societies evolve very fast. So my personal view always have been laws have to be principle in nature, not prescriptive in nature. Like if data empowerment, it must say that everybody must have access to data. Everybody must have the right to access my data, or my digital footprints. That's a good law to bring it in to empower the people. And the purpose of that law has to be also very clear. Prescriptions have to be very careful. I think our government, I'm not sure whether we do, sometimes we do a good job, sometimes we do a pretty bad job in terms of prescribing. And when they prescribe, they get it wrong, and then they go back and re-prescribe and so on. So I am of the opinion that sort of minimal prescription is what is needed. And you must let the entrepreneurial energy flow, and then look at the need for bringing regulations and rules, right? Sometimes you don't need it. You can just let those entrepreneurs innovate, and or don't curb them by government rules and regulations that not required. So because every time we put rules and regulation, it actually creates enormous friction in innovation. Okay, no question about it. Entrepreneurs find it very hard. But some things like tax paying and all that thing is tax and death, you can't avoid, I think, in life. So it's one of those things, right? So we just have to do it. And violence, laws, those kind of things, right? No choice but to have some sort of rules of the game to ensure that we are not becoming like animals. We are just developed society, and we must go towards thoughtful, careful, and empathetic society. So there's no question about that. But otherwise, generally, don't have to be prescriptive. So I think that's the balance. So it's very tricky. So I would, for example, blockchain, if you take it, that it was very, very key. It will go up and down with it's any tech bubble will burst, and it will go through a maturity cycle. And there is very good things about blockchain and a very bad hype around it. So we just have to, eventually it'll correct itself. But government steps in, when there are two things again, government is trying to step in. One, does it have a fundamental ability to remove the democratic institutions that exist? The central bank have no play, then we have a bigger problem, right? So I think when that comes, they'll start stepping in. Second, they start stepping in is when large section of society gets conned into doing shit, right? So for example, NFT, monkey NFT and all, people are investing, and the only investor, like my driver all starts investing in NFT, I would actually tell him, dude, are you crazy? Go support your daughter in education, all that thing, monkey NFT and all will come later. There's some rich people investing in rich thing doesn't mean you can. Now, taking 10% of your earning and playing it is no big deal, gambling it. But people don't understand that easily, and our societies may not understand. So that is when the government again steps in. So government does step in when they think, but every time they step in, they do create issues as well, okay? So we have to be very carefully balancing these acts.
Yeah. No, that's great, Pramod. Thank you. I think principles, not prescription, is the best thing to do from a legal point of view and policy point of view. Pramod, another question in terms of pushing the limits of technology. How have you seen, where do technologies like metaverse play a role in all of this? So where do you see AR, VR, actually coming into the overall mainstream experience?
So I think it is, for me, it's just a gradual, natural move towards what you call digital experience being expanded. We experience digital through laptops, and even before that on desktops, or even what do you call it, some sort of large machines. Typically, we didn't even have some desktop maybe. I don't know any of you have heard of Gopher protocol. Rahul may have, but he's slightly older, unlike you. Yeah. So early pre-HTTP days, and all of us were on Gopher protocol talking and all that thing, in 90s and 91 and all that thing. Then HTTP came, then Mozilla came, and our experiences kept improving. And then a mobile phone came and dramatically changed the idea of a keyboard going away. Keyboard was a very tech-driven innovation, techie-driven innovation, I would say. It's not for common man, right? And then we forced everybody to learn that damn thing, keyboard, right? But otherwise, the touch was a very natural human thing, and that's why it just took the computer in everybody's hand. Powerful computer with touch dramatically changed that experience. Now it's natural that it would go into more and more seamless experiences, immersive experiences, and immersive experiences that is, and the dial is between real world, which is what I see when I look out, versus completely virtual world, versus an augmented reality world, which is somewhere in between, right? Where I augment my digital information on top of my physical world. So when I see you, sort of start showing, oh, this is my friend from my contact, this is Rahul, and so on, right? You spoke to him 2 days back. Now, how creepy it is, I don't know, but that I think it's a creepiness is it's a generation gap, according to me. Creepiness is pure. Yeah. So people will go in there. But how is it? Is there just another technology? It will be impactful for. How do we drive these at the right time? When it start becoming mainstream, we can start leveraging them. I think our idea should be, unless you are building some of these core tech, I mean, you guys are all IITians and so on, so you can probably build some of this tech as well. But if you are not, leverage them. Where leverage happens when it starts becoming mainstream, and then you leverage where? If you are in health tech, you start asking this question, can telemedicine be dramatically changed to almost getting the experiences of me sitting in front of a doctor rather than staring at a flat Zoom screen, right? And so on, and or education for that matter, is dramatically changing. So leveraging is even more, leverage will be much higher than the people who create. Create will be, few people will create, more people will leverage, right? So we must think about leveraging at appropriate time. I mean, it's inevitable. This is all going to happen, and more digital. So some of the dystopian movies you see, where people just stop going out and only my avatar goes out and my avatar lives in the digital world. Possibly going to come true, partly going to come true, but I think I always believe society and humans will balance something out. Yeah, but my parents wouldn't like even me using my smartphone so much, right? They would say, "Why are you bloody staring at this damn thing all the time?" And then my children using it may be different from me, and so on. So I think it's just a continuous evolution.
Got it. Yeah, Pramod, this is wonderful. One question coming from Saket is, when it comes to education, what is the thing that's happening in the open source world to really drive inclusivity alone? Just that dimension of education. So when Dr. Garg earlier started off, he mentioned, look, even 99%, 0.9% of Aadhaar is not good enough. You need the 0.1%. Similarly, on the education front, what do you think is the real thing that's going to swing the needle towards 100% children really being educated? Because all the fancy technologies we talk about, oh yes, we'll get voice recognition, and oh yes, we'll get metaverse and all of this, they don't have access to even devices, right? Even a single device, while it's prevalent, children don't get access to it. So anything dramatic that you can think of, a future of education where it's 100% inclusive?
So there are two parts to it, very much two different, and we end up conflating many times. Oh, by the way, my video seems to have shown up. Right? So that's how I actually look. Okay, yeah, it's not how I used to look before. Yeah. So there are two parts. One, access to learning opportunities, opportunity to learn, opportunity to practice, like internships and so on, like you guys doing in GovTech, opportunity to practice, opportunity to be mentored, opportunity to access to scholarships and support system, right? Other resources like books and so on. We must, that's what's called a necessary condition. It's not sufficient, it's necessary condition for sure. We must attack systematically the access vector through reducing the cost of access and cost of delivery of this access. And we must be universal in nature, saying that nobody should be able to say, I don't get access, I didn't know about a scholarship. I was a poor girl who comes from a poor family. I didn't know there was a scholarship exists, right? So we must aggressively ensure, using digital technologies, that the plumbing is laid to every home where their access to the water, right? Access to that opportunity exists. Does not mean people will convert opportunity to actual outcome. And we don't even know what do you mean by everybody need to be educated.
Yeah.
Educated people can be completely wacko. Non-educated people can be quite sane. So I don't even know where that is so philosophical in nature. But we actually talk about two parts. Again, within educated, there's foundational learning. That means ability to think and ability to learn and the basic language comprehension and ability to do numeracy. Right? Basic understanding of numbers, basic very good grasp of language and comprehension, and on top of that, ability to learn and ability to practice, right? Ability to apply what you've learned. That's what education is about. What will you think? If you think that after all this education, getting out on the road and throwing stone at the bus is the right thing to do, we probably have to deal with it differently. That's not about education at all. It is about a collective conscience of a society and the value systems that we built into society. But I think this is left to individual.
Beautiful, beautifully put.
I think so. Don't connect all these things put into one box, and you will get confused about this box. So access is very simple. Digital access, everybody, opportunity. Ask the question: can I do something to change the opportunity vector? Can I provide better access? Then ask the question: can I give the basic outcome? Which is outcome is ability to learn, ability to comprehend, ability to think, and ability to apply. Can I give that for sure to every child? And then after that comes everything else.
This is like a Bloom's taxonomy for education, but not the Bloom's taxonomy. This is more of the Maslow's hierarchy for education, where roti, kapda, makan is at the bottom. Instead of that, you're saying, hey, access needs to be at the bottom.
And nobody should be denied of an access, because that is a bad setup to be in a democratic society.
Beautifully put. Pramod, one question from Parth. Parth's asking, how do you see open source initiated by government sustain over time in terms of adoption, contribution? How can we ensure sustainability of open source software?
Actually, very, very good point. I think when government, some of the earlier efforts we did, and Rahul and all will know, we did government, we did open source, and we did tech inside the government. Let me put it that way. That means a lot of us as volunteers, and I'm not a government employee, but we were volunteering to build all these things, right? We were helping the government build this technology inside them. But we realized their way, government being a taxpayer's money, they have a lot of procurement rules. That means they need to procure through only open tender, open RFP, open evaluation, and eventually they end up, that RFP driven method is very hard to sustain innovation. So in RFP driven method, it becomes if you know exactly what you want to build, then you can put an RFP. You can't put an RFP to say, imagine how Aadhaar will evolve or UPI will evolve. We didn't even know. I started UPI work in 2013, by the way. 2000 June is when I started UPI thinking, and UPI 2014 is when I started writing protocol. 2015 we did some early pilot. 2016 we launched. So 4 years later, how did we know where it will go? We have no idea how it will go. It will evolve itself. So RFPs don't cut it. So one of the learnings we had is that what if foundations and other organizations, institutions, open source communities like this step up and provide a sustainable, funded, well-designed open source infrastructure like the Apache Foundation did to tech and Mozilla Foundation did. Why can't India up the game and actually build a lot more digital tech that can be sustained by a powerful community, funded, maybe even funded through GitHub funding, donation funding? It doesn't matter. We have enough funds. By the way, we have never done the funds. That's a funny thing. Money is not the intent and the people wanting to do it. So if you can open source community, government can adopt it. So one of the things we did in 2014 is to bring open source policy within the government. So we asked the government to formally declare that you will adopt open source. Otherwise, they were not even ready to adopt open source because all these vendors will say, sir, open source and all, who will support? What will happen? You will die. Night time, one database will come down and you will be blamed. So they used to get afraid, right? You can scare them quite easily, by the way. Yeah, so because they don't know, their taxpayers' money, their spending and responsibility is very high on government bureaucrats because the impact could be in millions of people, no? So they're very sensitive about it. But so policy, you unblocked your earlier question, laws and policy. Where does policy is an unblocker? Policy we unblocked through a policy so that people can adopt open source. And then Aadhaar adopted, UPI adopted, and Diksha adopted, and everyone. Each time you have a successful, people used to say, of course, if Diksha can run, UPI can run, Aadhaar can run on open source, why can't my departmental system run on open source? No, these are national systems, yeah. Completely built on open source. UPI, there's not even database itself, everything is open source, by the way. UPI. No paid component in the entire 6 billion transactions a month we do, right? So it's amazing how much we can do. But that requires a sustenance and a powerful, committed, and accountable, responsible community. And the community creation comes from efforts like this.
Yes.
Systematically talking to students, you talking to the next batch, and everybody motivating people to say 10 lines. That's all you will need. But step up the game. You ought to be part of open source infrastructure that's going to be set up the way India is going to drive our democratic access in health, education, and so on. It's an opportunity. Some people may not want to take it. Some people want to take it. I think I see all of you taking it. It's wonderful. And congratulations again.
Great. No, fantastic, Pramod. Very, very pertinent points there. And I think you also answered one of the other questions that's coming in, which is what are the potential risks of open source technologies that entrepreneurs need to be cognizant about? You touched on a couple of those, right? You need to step up. You need to get this going. You need to ensure, adoption and openness to these things.
Well, I think the governance is a very important thing. I think Rahul and Samagra team has been tremendously pushy, frankly, very good pushy, by the way, about better governance, better transparent processes within the community, upvoting, downvoting features, and PR reviews, ensuring that the code that goes in, whatever we can in terms of community can. But the good thing is that even after all that, I think community output is still open source, and government can set up another layer of scrutiny. The good thing is about public scrutiny. That everybody can see the code. And the bad thing about public scrutiny is that everybody can touch the code and see the code. So you have to be very careful. If you don't have a good governance model, you have no idea what code has gone in. And as a community, people will ask you, your code is not dependable and reliable, and that's a bad thing. So as a community, it's a community problem. We need to make sure it's not a one entity problem. It is together. We have to believe that we will collectively do the right thing.
Perfect. No, thanks so much. There are a bunch of questions, but we're running out of time. One last question, Pramod. What's your message to our selected cohort now who would be working towards these DPG projects over the next 45 days? What would you like to say to them?
Only like maybe 2 or 3 messages. One, you are very, very lucky. I can tell you, because you are going to be, the code and the stuff that you're going to be doing is going to actually impact not few million, 10 million, 5 million, 100+ million, okay, of people in this country. So be very lucky, very proud. Be very proud of yourself. Second, shamelessly learn, okay, everything. And if you're not asking questions to mentors, and if your mentors are not giving answers, bring it out. You can even correct a mentor collective, open discussion boards where some of us can also start. We can't mentor you every day. It gets harder for us, but we can all participate and help it out. So maybe you can set up some sort of mechanism. So shamelessly learn. Okay, that's the second point I want to say. And third, most importantly, have fun. Definitely have fun. If you are not waking up wanting to do it, please don't do it. You can, there are lots of other good stuff to do in life. So you might want to try something else.
Fantastic messages, Pramod. No, thank you so much. Thank you so much for spending time with us. And it's just been so invigorating for the entire group to hear you speak and to hear of the potential for all of this. So I think it's very, very clear to everyone, I'm sure, all the contributors, mentors, that everything being done part of this initiative is going towards a greater good and really transforming lives at the with the bigger picture. Thanks
And
again.
all the very best, and thanks for having me. And take care of yourself.
Thank you so much, Pramod, for making time.